never die.
And this monster starts running right at me.
Annihilated by nuclear bombs.
Beast is not dead. I put 4 bullets into him.
Oh, you're crazy.
But I saw that monster too. All I want is for someone to believe me.
Contaminated.
Face. Horrible. Look like it would scare you to death.
All right, let's get to work.
Beyond the shadows. In the wilds of eastern Manitoba, beneath the vast silence of a pine-covered sky, a man emerged from the forest, staggering, burned, and reeking of something not entirely earthly. He was a mechanic by trade, an amateur prospector by passion, and on that spring afternoon in 1967, Stefan came face to face with something that should not have been there. He didn't just see a craft, he touched it, he examined it, and when it responded, it nearly killed him. Burned into his skin was a pattern, precise, symmetrical. Imagine the vent grid of a machine no one could identify. His shirt was torn, his gloves melted, and his body saturated with radiation. Officials from 2 nations would investigate. No one offered answers. What happened next would become the most physically documented UFO case in Canadian history. This is the Falcon Lake Incident.
Yes, that's right. The Falcon Lake Incident. Welcome, friends. Welcome, welcome. Welcome indeed. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 31 of Beyond the Shadows podcast. I'm your intrepid paranormal investigator, Victus. And tonight, I bring to you a conundrum. A query, if you will. Something spooky and unexplained. Yes, tonight we are talking about the Falcon Lake UFO incident. So this happened up in Canada, somewhere near Manitoba. It's eastern Manitoba, if I remember correctly. Yes, this is going to be interesting. This is going to be interesting. I'm getting my screen set up here so I can see everything. Fantastic, fantastic. So, right out of the gate, right out of the freaking gate. Using the S word, the stupid S word. I did notice this week that the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and a couple other platforms has comments disabled. For some reason, I'm enabling them, but they're not coming through. So I've got to get on with customer support and figure out what's going on there. So if you've been trying to comment in the episodes, please feel free to shoot over to YouTube to comment on the episodes until we get the streaming platform thing figured out. I don't know why it won't let people comment right now. I'm getting it figured out. And like always, welcome in again. This is Season 2, Episode 31, Beyond the Shadows podcast. We have the week in paranormal news. Here we go. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Without further ado, we do have some new and updating events this week. The Pentagon, the UAP reports, the Pentagon received over 700 new reports of unidentified anomalous phenomenon. UAPs, the term used by the military for UFOs, while many of these have been plausible explanations, balloon drones, etc., 21 cases remain unexplained and require further analysis. These incidents occurring mostly over the last 8 months, involving various shapes, including orbs, cylinders, triangles, according to Pentagon officials. Government investigations at a classified document from the U.S. Department of Defense All Domain Anomaly Research Office, AARO, mentioned in an investigation an alleged hotspot of paranormal activity at a property in Utah. The investigation included reports of shadow figures, creatures, and human consciousness anomalies, and even considered hiring psychics for the study to study interdimensional phenomena. However, the final report was stated no definitive findings of paranormal activity. So, official word from the coroner that did the autopsy and the guy who quote unquote died from the Annabelle doll said he was age of 54. His death, though not deemed suspicious by the coroner, has generated renewed interest in the discussion about paranormal and potential dangers associated with such investigations. Recent sightings and encounters, creepy creature caught on camera. A video from Pueblo, Colorado, showing an unknown creature has sparked speculation among locals and animal experts alike, with suggestions ranging from a raccoon or wolverine to the legendary chupacabra, aka the goat sucker. UFO sightings in Massachusetts. Multiple reports and videos have emerged from Massachusetts depicting a shining, cloaked object moving unusually in the night sky, leaving witnesses puzzled and raising questions about its origin. Personal encounters with the unexplained, stories and discussions about personal encounters with ghosts and other paranormal phenomena continue to be popular online, with people sharing accounts and seeing apparitions, experiencing strange occurrences, and feeling unseen presences. We do have a few things about, some parapsychology, but nothing really. Parapsychology continues to be an area of study exploring paranormal phenomena, including extrasensory perception, telepathy, clairvoyance, and near-death experiences. However, the field has been criticized for a lack of reproducible evidence and is largely considered as pseudoscience by mainstream scientists. And that gets us up to speed with this week in paranormal news. Yeah, well, that's just the way it goes. So I keep forgetting to make the jingle for that segment. I'm going to. I just gotta... I've got to sit down and do the damn thing. However, I do have one very small question. It's very small. And it's a simple question. But what shirt are you wearing today? So I got a cool one for you tonight. Buddy of mine, Hefner. Let me see if I could do the shout out correctly. I haven't done a shout out in so long. This SO. Did that work?
Go check out Hefner at twitch.tv/Hefner and go show them some love. Less than 3, less than 3, less than 3.
Yes, less than 3. Yes, shout out Hefner for this awesome shirt I'm wearing tonight. So check this thing out. See if you recognize this metal band. Anybody? Anyone? Labyrinth of Suffering? Anyone? I know you don't recognize it. And that's because it's not a real band. This has been my stumper shirt. I wear this and people are always like, "Hey man, cool shirt." And I'm like, "Yeah, cool, yeah. When's the last time have you heard Labyrinth of Suffering's new album?" And they're like, "Yeah, it was pretty cool, nice and heavy. The breakdowns were sick." I was like, "Oh, cool, right on." And I immediately knew they were lying because Labyrinth of Suffering is not a real band. The shirt was made for funsies. It was made just to look like a metal shirt, and it did its job. It looks like a metal shirt. Looks like a metal band. I get looks all the time, but it's a good it's a device to test individuals to see the caliber of that individual. So shout out Hefner. Thank you again, buddy. So I think that catches us up. We are up to speed. We got our shirt laid out for the week. We are down to like our last 10 or 12 shirts, and then we're about to start the rotation over again. I do believe that I have 52 t-shirts. So I said it. I said the word again. Always using it. Yeah, always using the S word. The new popular drinking game sweeping the country, Beyond the Shadows podcast. If you watch and every time I use the word so, take a drink. You would just as slather as me by the end of the show. I promise. We do got a good episode for you, though, this week. We are going to discuss the Falcon Lake UFO incident from eastern Manitoba in Canada. Kind of an interesting subject. I've been trying to see if I can find decent photos of it. Because I want to... yes. Why couldn't I find these earlier? Okay. Well, we'll bring this up later. We'll bring it up later, and we'll talk about it. And when it comes time, we will talk about it. However, it's not time. Not yet. Not yet, friends. Because we've got a mystery to unravel, and so we shall. So light a candle, check your locks, and lean in close, because tonight we're diving into...
The Falcon Lake UFO Incident.
Welcome, friends. I gotta sneeze. Hold on. I sneezed. Bless me. Thank me. I'm welcome. Let's carry on. Is everyone ready? Do you have a warm beverage? Is your blanket around your shoulders? Are you curled up on your favorite couch or recliner? Or perhaps you're curled in bed? Prepare yourself for mysteries. Here we go. Oh, I nearly forgot. This is Act 1. Eastern Manitoba is a place where silence isn't empty, it's heavy. The vast Canadian wilderness that sprawls between the Ontario border and the windswept plains is a mixture of ancient rock, dense pine forests, and glacier-carved lakes. In 1967, this region remained largely untouched by modern industry. Logging roads gave way to game trails, gas stations were few, cell towers didn't exist, and deep within this untouched terrain sat Falcon Lake, a cold, pristine body of water named for the birds of prey that circled the skies above it, quiet, isolated, and completely indifferent to human life. Hold on a second. I need to figure out how to pronounce this guy's name. Michalak. Okay. Michalak. This is where Stefan Michalak chose to spend his free time. A Polish immigrant and a veteran industry mechanic, Stefan had carved out a quiet life for himself and his family in Winnipeg, Manitoba. He was known among friends and neighbors as a logical, disciplined man, a tinkerer. A man who fixed things, who measured twice and cut only once. He wasn't the kind of person anyone associated with fantasy or superstition, but he did have a passion, one that pulled him out into the woods whenever time allowed. This passion was prospecting. He wasn't looking for treasure or chasing dreams of instant wealth. For Stefan, it was a technical hobby, something that combined geology, solitude, and manual labor in a way that spoke to his personality. He had no interest in UFOs. He didn't believe in aliens. His primary concerns were veins of quartz, silver, and nickel. And he'd been keeping track of promising rock formations just outside Whiteshell Provincial Park for months. And so, when the Victoria Day weekend arrived in May of 1967, Stefan packed his tools, maps, food, and a notepad, and boarded a bus heading east to Falcon Lake. So I am painfully curious where Falcon Lake is. All right, let's switch some scenes so you can see what I see. Falcon Lake, here it is. Oh geez, it is out in the middle of nowhere. Let's look and see if there's anything that has to do with UFOs here. I'm not seeing anything jumping out at me. I'm still not seeing anything that's like... Yeah, I'm not really seeing anything UFO related here, so that's interesting. Very, very interesting. Something to think about. So we're up here in Canada. This isn't too far from Michigan. Gonna fix my screen now. The first night. Wait, I should do sounds with that. Wait, here we go. Yeah.
When you beat the deep voice. Wait for it. Here we go. Wait for it. The first night.
Yeah, sorry. I get caught up in it sometimes. I just enjoy the production of it. So sue me. He spent his first night in the Falcon Motor Hotel, just off Trans-Canada. Canada. That's a place. Check it out. Just off Trans-Canada Highway. He had a modest room, a decent meal, and mapped out his plans for the following day. His intention was to hike toward a series of rock outcroppings he had marked earlier in the year. He knew the terrain, flat slabs of granite pocked with lichen, shaded by evergreens and littered with glacial deposits. For Stefan, it was peaceful work, quiet, methodical, and rewarding. He set out before sunrise on May 20 of 1967, hiking along game trails and cutting through thick brush until he reached the area he'd scouted. The morning was cool and overcast, the trees still damp from the snowfall, or from the snow melt. He carried with him a geological hammer, a compass, a sketchbook, and a small toolkit for chipping rock samples. He wore thick clothing, including a long-sleeve shirt and gloves, to protect against both the environment and his tools. By mid-morning, Stefan had already gathered several rock specimens and stopped for lunch near a large, flat outcrop. He was examining a quartz vein in the rock, noting its depth and shimmer, when something in the air shifted. What caught his attention wasn't a sound, but a flash of light. At first he assumed the glint was sunlight catching on the quartz or the reflection from a nearby aircraft. He looked up. The skies were partly cloudy with patches of blue peeking through the silver-gray ceiling. Then he saw it. 2 glowing objects, oval-shaped and metallic, descending quickly but smoothly through the night sky. They hovered silently, one above the treetops, the other slightly closer and drifting downward. He later described them as lens-shaped, each roughly the size of a bus with a soft reddish glow around the ridges. They weren't emitting any noise, they weren't moving erratically, they were
deliberate.
One of the objects suddenly shifted and zipped away, accelerating in a sharp arc toward the clouds. The other descended directly towards the clearing where Stefan stood, eventually coming to rest about 160 feet away, on the surface of the granite outcrop. He wasn't frightened at first, puzzled, yes, but fear didn't come until later. His initial thought was that it might be a military aircraft, possibly American. Falcon Lake wasn't far from the U.S. border, and 1967 was the peak of the Cold War paranoia. Strange aircraft, black projects, and experimental propulsion systems weren't unheard of, but he was curious. The object hadn't crashed, it had landed. With intention. He waited several minutes observing the craft. It was entirely metallic, dull silver with a smooth surface, no markings. No seams, no rivets, no flag or insignia. It was roughly 35 feet wide and about 10 feet high, and shaped like 2 saucers joined at the rim. Then he noticed something more startling. A hatch was opening. On the side of the craft, the hatch opened, revealing a softly lit interior. Inside, he saw panels of colored lights, flashing in sequences as though part of a control panel. There were muffled voices, unintelligible but rhythmic, as if someone or something was communicating inside. Stefan's heart raced, but he wasn't paralyzed. He stepped forward. He called out, once in English, then Polish, then in German.
Whoever you are, you may need help,
he said aloud. No response. The murmuring stopped. The light dimmed slightly inside the hatch. And then, without any warning, the hatch slammed shut. A perfectly sealed seam now, invisible to the eye. The entire craft began to rotate clockwise, slowly at first, then accelerating. Stefan instinctively took a step closer, reaching out with his gloved hand. That was a mistake. As soon as he touched the craft, his glove ignited. The fingertips immediately melted, fusing with his skin beneath. He recoiled, stumbling backward, but before he could fully retreat, a panel on the side of the craft opened and revealing a grid-like exhaust vent. Without any sound, without any warning, a hot blast of gas or steam shot out from the vent, striking Stefan squarely in the chest and abdomen. The force knocked him off his feet and onto the rocky ground. His shirt caught fire. His skin seared, his vision blurred. He described the pain as instantaneous and total, like being struck by molten metal. The smell of burning flesh and sulfur overwhelmed his senses. He tore off his shirt and undershirt in a panic, attempting to cool the searing heat. His hands were trembling, his eyes watering. The craft, now fully rotating, began to rise vertically, smoothly, silently, and within seconds it disappeared into the clouds above. Stefan was alone, injured, and very likely contaminated with something he couldn't understand. For the next 30 to 45 minutes, he lay on the rock, disoriented and nauseated. He attempted to stand, but fell. He tried to drink water from his canteen, but immediately vomited. His skin was burning. His chest felt like it had been microwaved from the inside out. The air still carried the smell of sulfur, and his clothes were scorched. Eventually, he managed to gather his supplies and stagger back down the hill. His instincts kicked in. He wanted to get back to the motel, back to civilization. But the trek out of the woods would take hours, and he was in no shape to navigate through the rough terrain. He fell several times, vomiting frequently, his balance unsteady. He would later describe the feeling dizzy, weak, and feverish, with intense stomach cramps. Along the way, an RCMP officer who offered assistance. He encountered an RCMP officer who offered assistance, but Stefan, afraid of ridicule or being labeled unstable, refused help. He didn't want to mention UFOs. He didn't want anyone thinking he was hallucinating. His only goal was to get medical attention. And eventually he made it to the Falcon Motor Hotel. Staff was alarmed by his condition. He was burned, pale, and reeking of something chemical and unnatural. Still, Stefan insisted on boarding a Greyhound bus back to Winnipeg. He arrived late that evening, and his son took him directly to... I'm not going to try to pronounce this name, but directly to the hospital. The doctors were baffled. Stefan presented with first-degree burns across his abdomen and chest, arranged in a perfect rectangular grid, a pattern that matched the description of the vent on the side of the craft. He had burns on his hands, especially where his gloves had melted. His skin showed signs of chemical exposure, and over the next 24 hours he developed symptoms consistent with radiation poisoning: nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, headaches, and fatigue. But there was a problem. When they tested him for common forms of radiation exposure, the Geiger counter readings were inconsistent. The readings at his home spiked briefly, then faded. His burns remained unexplained. His white blood cell count plummeted, then rebounded sharply. His body behaved like it had been exposed to short-term radiation, but no source was found. No ordinary explanation sufficed. So, do y'all want to see a picture of this guy's burns on his chest? It might be a little unsettling for some folks. Not gonna lie, it's a little weird. It's a little weird. Hold on, let me get these pictures pulled up. Trying to find a better picture than this one. Maybe that one? Oh, please. Here we go. And check out this madness. So these are the burns on this guy's... It says this chest, but obviously it's his stomach, which is a little weird. Yeah, look, here's his shirt, too. Like, his shirt was... Yeah, look at... The shape is there twice. That's interesting. Yeah, the shirt is definitely burned. It's weird that this was the vent here in the middle, but the top right, yeah, I guess the top right portion of the shirt is... Oh, no, the rest of the shirt is burned, too. You can see where it was cut off of him here. So, burned in the front and the back? Yeah, because if we put this shirt back together, because it's... You can see here the left and the right and the bottom. It's been cut off of him, so that's a standard medical procedure. Yeah, this shirt looks like it had been cut off of him. It's laying flat now. But it's weird that there's burns on the chest and then burns on his back, too. don't know. Can radiation penetrate things and burn something on both sides? So if radiation were to penetrate a human, would it burn the fabric on both sides of the human? Question. That's a really good question. Let me allow me a moment to query ChatGPT. If anyone will know, it is they. If well, let me read it, or let me say it out loud. If a man were wearing a shirt, oh, it won't select my mic. Okay, hold on, never mind. If a man were wearing a shirt, whoa, hold on, what did I do there? And was blasted with radiation, would his shirt burn on both sides of his torso? All right, very interesting results here. Depends on the type of radiation we're talking about, because different types of radiation interact with matter in very different ways. Thermal or intense light radiation, if the radiation is essentially heat or light from a blast, fireball, strong UV, it would strike the exposed surface of the shirt and ignite the char of the outer layer. In that case, the side of the torso facing the source would be burned, while the backward shirt would likely be untouched. However, ionizing radiation, these pass through fabric and human tissue much more easily. They don't usually burn clothing on contact. Instead, they deposit energy inside the body, damaging cells. Particle radiation, alpha and beta. Alpha particles can penetrate fabric. They don't only affect the outside of the shirt if contaminated landed on it. Beta radiation can scorch or weaken fabric where particles land, but again, this would mostly be on the side facing the source. So if you're facing a nuclear flash or thermal beam, the shirt would mostly be burned on the front. If you're picturing a high penetration radiation like gamma rays, the shirt itself probably wouldn't burn. So let's ask it what would cause a shirt to burn on both sides of a torso and only leave marks on the man. So it's having trouble really nailing down how that could happen. So that's interesting. Okay, we do have one solution here. In high voltage accidents, current can travel over and through clothing, instantly igniting it. Fabric may flash burn on both sides, the outside layers at once, but the plasma envelops the torso, while the skin only shows contact marks, arc entry, exit points, pattern burns. Stick with me. This would explain the fabric charring front and back with only superficial markings on the person. Interesting. The most likely causes would be a thermal flash, nuclear incendiary type, or a high electrical discharge or radiant discharge. Both could cause fabrics to burn on both sides of the torso, while the person underneath is left with only marks rather than being fully burned. Interesting indeed. So now that it mentions it, right? That does make sense. Maybe we're dealing with an electrical discharge instead of a radiation discharge. Maybe that's why, like he feels unwell, sure, because your body is an electromagnetic sync, right? We soak up electromagnetic fields. We produce them. Who's to say that maybe the exhaust from this UFO wasn't nuclear or radiation per se, but it was a discharge of electrical energy. Very, very interesting. Very interesting indeed. We're going to keep that in the back pocket for now, because I feel like this might come into play later. Hard to say. It's really hard to say. So at this point, Stefan hadn't told the media anything. He didn't want to. He wasn't chasing attention, but the nature of his injuries, the growing rumors, and the eventual involvement of Canadian and American authorities would push his story into national spotlight. He hadn't just seen something, he had survived something, and the world was about to find out. So, what a very, very, very interesting Act 1. We've got an individual who saw two UFOs. One takes off into the sky. The other one lands, and when he approaches it, the door slams shut, and it goes to spin its UFO tires, essentially, and he gets blasted with whatever, a radiation, electrical discharge, what have you. Hard to say. But the vent blast leaves marks on him, destroys his shirt on both sides of his torso, but not his torso, which is very strange. Electrical seems like the best option here. Very strange indeed. And then he staggers back to town. Kudos on this guy. He marched 2 hours through the wilderness with no roads. Injured, with his shirt falling off of him. I don't know. He says he did lose a couple layers, so he lost 2 layers of shirt before so he must have been staggering back to town with the undershirt on. It's just, yeah, it's very interesting, to say the least. Anywhoots. So that was Act 1. Very, very interesting. I'm curious if wow, there's some really fantastic photos of this guy's injuries here. I'm scrolling, looking to see if there's anything else. But I'm just not seeing anything. Ooh, okay. We actually have like a sketch that he drew. I'm trying to find the best resolution to bring up. Because I would really like to be able to read what's going on here, but yeah. Let me minimize or bring this window up all the way, and I'll show you guys what I'm looking at here. Check this out. This is his sketch of the UFO. So you can see there, for those not watching but listening, what we're looking at here is a very standard UFO shape. It's a sketch likely done in pencil because the copy isn't very good. It's very low resolution, so it's very old. We do see some technical information written around it and some like lines designating, where information should be attached. However, you can see in the bottom left of the UFO where what we're calling the vent, where it came from, and to the right of that, I'm assuming, is the door that opened. It's interesting that he says there was no seams, but he clearly draws seams on this. Just saying. Suspicious, yay, nay? I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. Very interesting photo, though. Very interesting indeed. Which brings us on to Act 2, everybody. Act 2, the investigation and fallout. That's my Hourglass impersonation. Reach out, Ira. I'll interview you for the podcast. I'm sure you've got some great stories to tell. We've come to Act 2 of our episode. Act 2, where we cover the investigation and fallout from him leaving the hospital and the RCMP becoming involved in the investigation. Act 2. Let's go. The moment Stefan stepped into the hospital in Winnipeg, the Falcon Lake Incident stopped being a personal nightmare and became a national enigma. The burns were real, the symptoms were severe, and the story, what little he initially shared, was far too strange to ignore. In a world still buzzing from the space race with public fear of nuclear explosion and Cold War experimentation, the idea of a man being burned by an unknown craft in the wilderness wasn't something authorities could casually dismiss. Whether he'd been attacked by a secret military aircraft, exposed to some environmental hazard, or encountered something entirely else, someone wanted answers. And soon multiple layers of government came knocking. The first to follow up were officers with the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, who had been alerted by staff at the Falcon Motor Hotel about Stefan's condition when he passed through days earlier. Now that he had been hospitalized and his injuries were known, they opened a formal file and assigned constables to speak with him. Stefan wasn't looking for publicity. He was hesitant, guarded, and still in pain. He repeated the same story. He encountered a metallic craft in the wilderness, approached it. What are you doing, soundboard? What are you know what? We'll just go to a different sound. Let's do the outside. I said stop the sounds. Oh my jeez. Stupid soundboard. Okay, well it's being dumb. I do believe my tablet is frozen, the one that I use for sounds. Oh. Okay, cool. Apparently my tablet wants to restart now. I'm gonna let it restart. And I'm just gonna turn that down so you don't hear the sounds of my tablet restarting. He repeated the same story. He had encountered a metallic craft in the wilderness, approached it, believing it might be a U.S. aircraft, and burned by a sudden blast of hot gas. He didn't say UFO, and he didn't say alien. He was measured in his language, specific, clear. To the RCMP, that made the whole thing more unsettling, not less. One of the first officers to interview him noticed that he didn't behave like a crank. Crank? Who put that word in there? There were no signs of intoxication. His burns were fresh and distinct. His demeanor was consistent with someone who had been traumatized, not someone playing a prank. But the story still sounded impossible. And so they did what good investigators do. They went to the scene. A team of RCMP officers accompanied Stefan back to the site of the encounter at Falcon Lake several weeks later. He led them through the bush, retracing his steps from memory. Despite the remote location, Stefan was able to guide them precisely to the rock outcropping where he said the encounter took place. What they found was not easily explained. There on the smooth granite slab was a circular patch of scorched moss and lichen. The burn was not accidental. It was clean and precise and radioactive. Tests revealed elevated readings from radium-226 and thorium-232 in the soil, two radioactive isotopes that don't typically appear in such concentrations on surface-level terrain. The patch appeared to be the size and shape of the base of the craft that Stefan described, roughly 15 feet in diameter. The moss within the circle had completely died off and the soil was discolored. Even insects avoided the area. Authorities collected samples, and so did Stefan. And that's when things got weirder. Stefan had kept the shirt he was wearing during the incident. It was burned in the same rectangular grid pattern as his skin. It also tested positive for radioactivity, even weeks after being stored in his home. The radiation was localized, not general, meaning specific spots on the shirt triggered the Geiger counters when the surrounding areas didn't. Even his metal tools showed signs of unusual damage. The compass he had used was demagnetized. Small tools in his kit were slightly warped as though exposed to intense heat. His gloves were fused at the fingertips just as he described. Scientists, both public and private, examined the evidence. The Royal Canadian Air Force opened a file. The Canadian Department of Health and Welfare ran tests, and in a highly unusual move, the U.S. Air Force also launched an investigation through Project Blue Book, which was still active at the time. For weeks, samples were flown to labs in Ottawa, Winnipeg, and even the United States. Results were inconsistent. Some showed minor contamination, others showed none, but all agreed on one thing: the burns were real. The radioactive material were unusual, and the story it fabricated was unlike any the authorities had seen before. However, back in Winnipeg, Stefan wasn't recovering well. His physical injuries slowly healed, but the internal symptoms lingered far longer. He continued to suffer from intense headaches, recurring bouts of nausea, and weight loss. Doctors noted symptoms that mimicked radiation poisoning, but his exposure levels, according to some labs, were inconsistent. Some theorized he may have been exposed to a burst of ionizing radiation, the kind that doesn't leave a long-lasting signature but causes cellular damage. Others believed his symptoms were psychosomatic. But if he was imagining things, his body hadn't gotten the memo. And then the media caught wind of the story. This is where shit starts to turn sideways here. As news of the incidents leaked through the RCMP and hospital sources, reporters descended on Stefan's home. Photographers camped outside. Headlines used words like UFO encounter and alien burn victim and man attacked by flying saucer. His family found themselves under siege, and Stefan's teenage son, Stan, recalled having classmates mock him at school. His wife, Maria, was harassed by neighbors and strangers alike. Stefan himself didn't help the media frenzy. He refused most interviews, declined television appearances, and didn't try to sell his story. He wasn't interested in money. In fact, he lost wages from missed work and paid out of pocket for most of his medical bills. The skepticism was immediate and brutal. Journalists labeled him a hoaxer, a crank, even a con artist. But Stefan had never sought attention. His story was detailed and consistent. He never once claimed the craft was alien in origin. He stuck to the facts, even those facts were insane. In an effort to clear his name, Stefan underwent a full psychiatric evaluation. The results? He was of sound mind, not delusional, not suffering from any hallucinatory disorders or stress. And his family hoped this would calm the storm. However, it didn't. Apparently my soundboard tablet decided it's time for updates. So, sorry for the eerie, odd silence. I will bring it back online just as soon as it's done. Behind the scenes, investigators from the U.S. Air Force's Project Blue Book were quietly collecting data. Although Canada and the U.S. had no formal joint investigations at the time. Unofficial communication took place between military contacts. Project Blue Book files, which would later be declassified decades later, showed the Americans took the case very seriously. Their internal notes indicated that the Falcon Lake incident was one of the very few UFO reports supported by physical evidence, bodily injury, and trace radiation. Even though the project's public face remained skeptical, privately they acknowledged that this was, quote, a significant event. In one memo, a Blue Book investigator wrote, quote, "There is no indication that this was a hoax. The witness is credible. The physical effects are not easily explained." End quote. Still without definitive proof, the case remained labeled as unexplained, heavy air quotes, a term that gave deniability without discrediting the possibility. Meanwhile, independent researchers began to visiting the site on their own. Among them was oh my gosh, what's with all these crazy names? Chris R. Let's just call him R. Chris R. A prominent Canadian UFO investigator who would later become one of the foremost chroniclers of Stefan's case. Chris confirmed that the area still showed signs of unusual decay and that no natural explanation had ever accounted for the scorch marks or isotope concentrations. In the years that followed, multiple attempts were made to replicate Stefan's injuries using natural explanations. Lightning strikes, swamp gas, even a camp stove explosion. None of these fit the facts. The grid pattern burns, the radioactive circle, the lingering symptoms, they all remained unexplained. And despite internal reports and evidence, the Canadian government publicly denied any knowledge of the encounter. Official statements referred to the event as, quote, unverified, and urged citizens not to jump to conclusions. Stefan was never charged with a crime. He was never fined. He was never arrested. But he was also never compensated, never acknowledged, and never believed by the institutions that had so eagerly investigated him. Years later, he would recall, quote, "If I could go back in time, I would not tell a soul." So this brings us to the close of Act 2. So by 1968, the fervor around the Falcon Lake incident had begun to fade, and Stefan's life would never return to normal. His health remained fragile, his privacy forever disturbed, and his legacy immortalized in one of Canada's most enduring unsolved mysteries. He didn't ask for anybody. He didn't claim to be a prophet or a messenger or a victim of an alien abduction. He was a man who touched something he shouldn't have and paid the price. So next up in Act 3, we're going to take a closer look at the scientific efforts to explain the case, the skeptical counterclaims, and the legacy of the evidence, including what's still sitting in radioactive storage today. So, oh my gosh, I read all that and I didn't say the S word once. So, I drink. I think it's time to open a can of bubbly beer. Bubbly. Shout out to Voodoo Ranger if y'all want to sponsor this podcast. I would gladly accept. That's the sound of the weekend starting. Voodoo Ranger. Juice Force IPA. That's the taste of Juice Force IPA. I don't know. I usually get a quick little witty little response. I don't have it tonight. I'm sorry. I need my co-host back. Come on, Aeon. Get your stuff done. Come out and play. So are y'all ready for Act 3, where we cover the science, skeptics, and the grid? All right. So we're dealing with something very interesting. the physical evidence stands out from the rest of this by a long shot. Very strange. Let's look again at this fella's strange burn patterns. So here's his, well, bad example because my little camera's in the way. But still, you can see it a little bit. Strange burn patterns, to say the least. We have many, many photos of this guy laying in a hospital bed. Let me bring that one up instead. Here we go. Very strange burn patterns. I can't think of anything that would leave these kinds of marks. Not even today. And I can't see somebody doing this to themselves. You know what I mean? Even to kind of drive a story home to make it believable, right? It seems like a long way to go to get people to believe your story. Give yourself radiation poisoning. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's a weird placement, to say the least. Yeah, like between his shirt and... Let's go back to the shirt. I want to look at the shirt again. Yeah, very strange. Very, very strange. I still don't quite know how I feel about this. I really don't. All right. Well, strange shirt aside, we do have a very interesting case going on here. I wish somebody were in chat so I could bounce it off of them and see what they thought. But, it's just, that's the way it goes sometimes, There's not always somebody in chat, and I'm sorry. I will have my co-host back one of these days, and this will be a great podcast yet again. So now we've come to Act 3, everyone. Act 3, Science, Skeptics, and the Grid, where we talk about the grid pattern and radioactive soil and rock. Act 3. In the realm of unexplained phenomena, most stories collapse under scrutiny. They fall apart when tested. Witnesses change their stories. Evidence fades. Experts find perfectly rational explanations. Weather balloons, Venus, ball lightning, mental illness, hoaxes, and yet Falcon Lake didn't collapse. It did the opposite. The deeper the investigators dug into Stefan's case, the more they discovered something real had happened. Something measurable, quantifiable, and terrifyingly consistent. So let's start with the one thing that no one could ignore. The burns. First-degree burns across the abdomen are common in thermal accidents. What's not common is the perfectly symmetrical pattern of small circular marks spaced evenly across a grid on the skin, like something pressed into the flesh with mechanical precision. Photos taken within days of the incident show the injuries clearly. The patterns matched exactly the vent array Stefan described on the side of the craft, rectangular about 1.5 by 3 feet with evenly spaced openings. These weren't splash burns or chemical irritations, they were localized contact burns. Several medical specialists, both Canadian and American, examined the photos and Stefan's hospital records. Their conclusion were always the same. The injuries were real and consistent and not self-inflicted. Later, when questioned whether it would have created, what could have created the injuries using a hot object, say a stove, grate, or a grill, investigators tested the theory. They pressed similar grates into meat and synthetic materials. The results were irregular and inconsistent, lacking the symmetry seen in Stefan's wounds. The idea that he faked the burns didn't quite hold up. And in late of May 1967, shortly after Stefan's hospital release, he returned to the site once again, this time without RCMP. He brought with him a Geiger counter borrowed from a friend and discovered something chilling. The rock surface where the craft had landed, particularly the center of the scorched circle, still triggered elevated radiation levels. Samples he collected were later analyzed in labs across Canada, including the Radiation Protection Division of the Canadian Department of Health and Welfare. Say that 5 times fast. With the results, several soil and moss samples contained trace amounts of radium-226 and thorium-232, rare elements that can emit alpha radiation but are not naturally found in surface concentration in that region. These weren't trace background levels. One scientist who reviewed the data called the readings inconsistent with natural decay profiles for the area. In plain language, the radiation didn't belong there. More concerning was the fact that the burn circle on the rock was biologically sterile for several years. Moss and lichen refused to grow back. Insects avoided it. Animals steered clear. It was as if something had poisoned the granite slab permanently. In what would become a critical piece of physical evidence, Stefan turned over his shirt to authorities for testing. The burns in the fabric matched the pattern on his body, and several small metal fragments embedded in the fabric tested positive for elevated radiation levels. The shirt was tested at several facilities, including the University of Colorado UFO Project, aka the Condon Committee, the Canadian Atomic Energy Commission, and the Health and Welfare Canada. Each lab confirmed localized radiation hotspots, but none could determine how they got there or how to replicate them using conventional sources. Even more strange, the gloves Stefan wore were partially melted, fused at the fingertips, and soaked in something that was never conclusively identified. The tools he had in his bag were also warped. His compass no longer functioned, and it became demagnetized. Scientists attempted to recreate the combination of damage using electromagnetic pulses, microwave radiation, and even exposure to aircraft engines. Nothing matched. The next phase of the investigation involved psychological testing. After facing weeks of public ridicule and media harassment, Stefan voluntarily agreed to a psychic evaluation. He wanted to prove he wasn't lying, he wasn't delusional. And over a series of interviews and assessments, 2 independent psychiatrists concluded the same thing. Stefan was mentally sound, and he showed no signs of hallucinations, dissociations, or personality disorders. He was not prone to fantasy, and he genuinely believed what he experienced. In fact, one psychiatrist noted that Stefan exhibited symptoms of trauma, including nightmares, hypervigilance, and physical stress responses when recounting the incident, consistent with a post-traumatic event, not fabrication. So now,
enter the skeptics.
Of course, the UFO research community wasn't without its critics, and some were determined to dismantle the Falcon Lake case. Some skeptics proposed that Stefan fabricated the incident to gain fame or profit, but this theory didn't hold too much weight. He never tried to sell a story. He refused most media interviews. He paid for his own medical care. He lost time from work, resulting in financial strain, not gain. And he never published a book or sought movie rights. In fact, according to his son Stan, the entire experience left the family financially and emotionally drained. Another theory was that Stefan had been drinking in the woods and either hallucinated the event or accidentally burned himself in a fire-related incident. But this theory also was flawed. Stefan didn't drink. He was known to abstain entirely. Toxicology reports taken at the hospital showed no alcohol in the system. There were no signs of alcohol containers or campfire remnants at the site. His injuries were not consistent with a campfire accident. Interesting. This is actually something I was thinking about. But I wasn't quite sure. It's hard to say. Because, a piece of me was like, oh, he's drinking, right? That's his thing. But apparently, he was abstinent. He didn't he didn't partake in adult beverages, unlike somebody. Yeah. This is usually where I cue some sound effect, but the tablet is still updating. Oh my God. Absolutely ridiculous. So now we've come to the stove explosion theory. A more creative theory suggesting that Stefan may have accidentally burned himself with his portable stove, possibly in a fuel explosion, and made up the UFO encounter to cover for it. But again, his stove was intact and showed no signs of explosion. The burn pattern on his body and his shirt didn't match any component of the stove, and radiation was found on the ground and in the soil, not just in Stefan's clothes. No one ever replicated the damage using a camp stove or camping accident simulation. I think we can rule that one out. I really do. So despite the skepticism, many scientists remained intrigued by the case for decades. The University of Manitoba preserved many of the original documents, sketches, radiation logs, and correspondence related to the case in an open archive. Chris, one of Canada's foremost ufologists, continued to research the case into the 2000s and beyond, publishing in-depth reports and conducting interviews with both Stefan and his son Stan. The Condon Committee, tasked with evaluating UFO cases for the U.S. government, included the Falcon Lake Incident in their files. Even they admitted that the event presented, quote, a number of unexplained physical effects. Privately, several researchers in the U.S. and Canada described the case as the most compelling UFO event involving physical trace evidence in Northern American history. Northern American history. Even though it happened in Canada. What? Come on. Quit claiming it. It's not ours. Let it go. In the early 1970s, new players entered the story, geologists and metallurgists who studied the radioactive rocks taken from the sites. Here's what they found.
The rocks were granite, typical for the region. Several samples had metallic particles embedded on the surface, some with elevated radiation levels. One sample contained partially fused metal traces, as if exposed to intense heat or plasma discharge.
A lab at AECL, the Atomic Energy of Canada Limited, examined the materials and confirmed that they were not artificially tampered with. The radiation was naturally occurring but highly concentrated and not in a pattern consistent with environmental decay or contamination. The conclusion? Quote, the contamination appears recent and unnatural. Source undetermined. End quote. To this day, some of the original materials remain radioactive in radioactive storage under strict containment protocols. So by the 1970s, Stefan had stopped giving interviews. He grew tired of the skepticism, tired of being labeled a liar, and tired of being studied like an exhibit. He had spent years enduring chronic illness, migraines, and anxiety, all following his encounter. Even though the physical scars eventually faded, the psychological wounds remained raw. He did give one last televised interview in the 1980s, in which he said, quote, "I wish I'd never seen it. I wish no one told anyone. I wish I never told anyone. But I did. And it happened." End quote. He passed away in 1999, never once changing his story. Stefan's legacy lives on more than just news clippings and declassified reports. His son, Stan, eventually co-authored a book titled, quote, "Where They Appeared," which recounts the events from the family's perspective. Stan has said repeatedly that he didn't believe his father at first, but the evidence, the suffering, and the consistency of the story changed his mind. And in 2018, the Royal Canadian Mint released a commemorative coin honoring the Falcon Lake Incident, complete with a glow-in-the-dark illustration of Stefan and the UFO. Oh my gosh. I need to find this. Hold on. Yeah, I gotta find this right now. Surely it's not ridiculous, right? Oh my gosh. Oh, geez. If you are listening and not watching, this is the point where you need to pull your phone out and look at this ridiculousness. Oh my gosh. Look at these commemorative coins. Oh my geez. And dude got a $20 coin minted after him. Look, there's the vent and everything. That's so funny. Oh my gosh, it's so ridiculous. So it glows in the dark. It glows in the dark. I want to see what it looks like glowing in the dark. Oh, sure. Is this it? Here, let me. Come on. I gotta have one of these. I gotta have one. It's absolutely ridiculous. Let me see. Let's click on the shopping tab. What? Why are these so expensive? Dude wants $1,000. Ain't no way. Ain't no way. Ain't no freaking way. Really? Nobody else is selling one? Let's look at eBay. Oh my god. There's one going for 3,000 Canadian? No freaking way, man. I mean, it's cool, but ain't no way. Ain't no freaking way. Ain't no way I'm gonna a $20 coin. I'm not about to pay $1,000 for a freaking coin. Jeez Louise. Absolutely ridiculous. Y'all got me fucked up with somebody who's got money. Because it ain't me. Absolutely ridiculous. Wow. Absolutely wow. No, that ain't happening. $1,000. Here I wanted to buy something cool for the podcast. $1,000. Cheap. $1,000. The big fancy one is $3,000. Came with his own little black light and everything. Very fun. So we've come to the closing of Act 3. So 50 years later, the burn mark on that rock has faded. The radiation levels have diminished. The skeptics have moved on, but the question remains. What kind of craft leaves a landing circle of scorched moss? What kind of machines burns a man without a flame? And who or what was inside? So in Act 4, we're going to explore the wider implication of the Falcon Lake Incident, how it influenced military reporting, UFO research in Canada and the US, and why even today no one has been able to disprove it. So, we've come to the end of Act 3. I said the S word again. So we've come to the end of Act 3. We're 3/5 of the way done, folks. I know a lot of people out there are listening. If you are listening at this point, we're an hour and 15 in. Drop a comment, because I'm going to figure out these comment things for too long. Drop a comment down below. Let me know that you're actually listening to this point. Am I making this content for no reason? I'd like to know that somebody listens to this point. I know I do. My comments don't count. But hey, look, seriously. If you're listening at this point in the episode, we're, 3/5 of the way through, drop a comment. Let me know that you're actually listening. I don't know. The analytics don't tell me nothing. They don't tell me anything. I would like to know if there are actually people listening to the entire episode. I think the average listening time is like 22 minutes. So at this point, right? At this point, what difference does it make, right? I'm playing with the tags on Twitch, trying to bring some more people in. We have had 0 viewers all night long. I'm so glad to be talking to nobody. I wish my soundboard would finish updating so I could bring it back up. Well, okay. I'm going to take a quick little break, folks, and we'll be right back. So hold tight. Don't go anywhere. All 0 people watching. Hold, please. Okay, friends, we've returned. Oof. And we're nearly to the end. We've come to the last little bit. Oh my gosh, the tablet finally updated. Looking for me. Yes, see my face. Unlock, please. Let's get some sounds. Gonna change this back to just chatting. Because nobody's watching anyway. All right, let me get this soundboard back up. Yes, soundboard. Yeah, we gotta have it. It brings out it fleshes out the entire podcast. It's really, really hard to tell a spooky story that's, it's really hard to tell a spooky story without sounds, right? Oh, there it is. The soundboard is back up, everybody. Wait. Oh. I gotta turn the sounds back up. And there it is. We're back. And tonight we're talking about aliens. Freaking aliens.
Astronaut theorists propose.
I'm not saying it's space aliens, right? But it goes without saying it's fucking space aliens.
Space aliens. We're dealing with aliens tonight. We've come to Act 4, everybody. Act 4. We're talking about the echoes in the sky. I'm hoping those of you that are listening at home are drinking right along with me. We're having a good time. Trying to, anyway. We're doing our best here tonight. We're doing our very, very best. I hope somebody comes along and just pops in the chat. Anybody. It would be fine. Again, if you're listening this late into the podcast, please drop a comment down below. Let me know that you're actually listening. Do I need to shorten it? Do I need to make this podcast shorter? Is it too long? Tell me something, right? Tell me you don't like it. Anything. Anywhoots, let's get back into it. We're on to Act 4. Act 4. Stefan's case remained one of only a handful of UFO encounters officially investigated by both Canadian and U.S. governments and never conclusively debunked. The RCMP, Canadian Armed Forces, and Department of National Defense, even the U.S. Air Force thought through Project Blue Book, all compiled internal reports in every instance. The case was left open or marked as unsolved. The word unsolved may sound benign, but within military and scientific communities, it is a loaded term. Unsolved means we don't know, and more importantly, it means we couldn't disprove it. In declassified Blue Book files, the internal memos express clear unease. One particular stark summary states, quote, "The Falcon Lake case is not a hoax and is supported by sufficient physical evidence to warrant further study. No known conventional explanation suffices at this time." End quote. Yet despite that admission, no further study was publicly undertaken. So why would a case so rich in physical data, burns, soil samples, damaged tools, Sorry about that. Had to sneeze. So why would a case so rich in physical data, burned soil samples, damaged tools, psychological assessments, and medical documentation be allowed to fade into obscurity? The answer, as always, may lie in what wasn't said. In the 1960s, Canada didn't have a formalized UFO reporting protocol. Civilian reports were often passed through local law enforcement who might forward them to the RCMP. From there, depending on the severity or credibility of the case, the reports might be reviewed by the Department of Natural Defense. Stefan's case was different. It involved physical injury, environmental contamination, and a potential national security concern near the U.S. border. It demanded a response, and behind the scenes it got one. But the public-facing stance was measured and silent. Government officials made vague statements about possible natural explanations, but they never formally discredited Stefan. No official ever accused him of lying, no criminal charges were filed, no fraud investigation was launched. They investigated, then withdrew, and Stefan was left to bear the weight of it alone. It was, in essence, the perfect containment strategy. Acknowledging nothing, admit nothing, let time wash it away. But even silence leaves a paper trail. Yeah, the soundboard's back up, everybody. The soundboard is back. What many people don't know is that Canada had quietly engaged in UFO research decades before the Falcon Lake Incident. In the early 1950s, under engineer Wilbert B. Smith, the Department of Transportation launched Project Magnet, a small research initiative to study magnetic anomalies and a possible connection to unidentified flying objects. Smith was convinced that UFOs were real, and more importantly, that they were likely interplanetary in origin. He even claimed to have had discussions with U.S. officials who confirmed the phenomena was taken seriously at the highest levels. While Project Magnet was officially shut down in 1954, internal memos and research efforts continued under the radar, particularly in relation to the electromagnetic propulsion and radiation signatures, which makes Stefan's encounter, a full 13 years later, eerily relevant. The circular burn pattern, the grid pattern, the demagnetized compass all fit into the same unexplained physical phenomena that Smith's team had attempted to analyze in secret. But in 1967, no one at the federal level wanted to reopen the door. Falcon Lake was too high profile, too messy, too radioactive, literally and politically. So they walked away, but they didn't forget. And at the same time in the U.S., Project Blue Book was entering its final years. The U.S. Air Force had grown tired of investigating cases that never seemed to resolve cleanly. Budgets were stretched, and the political pressure was mounting to classify all UFO sightings as harmless or unexplainable. But Stefan's case wouldn't play along. When U.S. investigators reviewed the evidence by Canada, they were faced with a puzzle. A man with no history of mental illness, documented burns from an unknown heat source, soil samples with anomalous radiation, material damage consistent with exposure to high-energy propulsion, and no clear motive for hoax, and no gain from deception. Privately, several Blue Book investigators noted that Falcon Lake was, quote, one of the strongest cases they had ever reviewed, end quote. Publicly, the file was burned under the label insufficient data, a bureaucratic dodge. And in 1967, Project Blue Book was officially terminated. Its final report concluded that there were no evidence that UFOs posed a threat to national security and no conclusive proof that they represented alien technology. But as with many government reports, what was written in public and what was said in private were two very different things. Meanwhile, back in Winnipeg, Stefan was trying to piece his life back together, but the physical toll never quite stopped. He continued to experience frequent nausea, chronic headaches, rapid weight loss, fatigue, and memory lapses. and doctors remained baffled. Some wrote it off as psychosomatic, others suspected radiation exposure, but couldn't confirm the source. For his part, Stefan never wavered. He never changed his story, and he never embellished. And in every interview, every official report, every drawing and diagram, the details stayed the same. But the emotional toll was harder to quantify. He was ridiculed, mocked, painted as a crank. Crank is a Canadian term for an alcoholic. A crank by journalists who had never once spoken to his... Bleh. You know, that's a good time to pause. Let me pause. Get rid of my empty can. And let's bring out a full can. Yes. Lip, I see you in there. I see you just popped in. Hello, welcome, friend. Glad to have you. Better late than never, I always say. Very, very glad to have you. We're dealing with a very interesting UFO encounter case that has an overwhelming level of physical evidence. It's a very interesting case so far. But I do have something I want to pick apart later, and we'll bring it up here in a little bit. I want to make sure I have these photos ready. Yeah. Yeah, I got my photos ready. I got them ready. Anyway. Let's have a little sip. A sip. A sippy poo. A little tiny sippy poo. Gotta have it. That's right. Gotta have it. But the emotional toll was harder to quantify. He was ridiculed, mocked, and painted as a crank by journalists who had never once spoken to him in person. His son was bullied at school. His wife had to deal with reporters at her front door. They were a quiet family, suddenly thrust into the harsh spotlight of public scrutiny. Stefan lost time from work. He lost friends. He lost privacy, and yet he never capitalized on it. He never wrote a book. He never sold movie rights. He never went on to a speaking tour and branded himself as a UFO celebrity. All he ever did was tell the truth as he knew it. And for that, he paid the price. True. It's very true. To this day, the image that sticks with most people, the thing that gets whispered about in online forums and UFO circles, is the burn pattern on Stefan's chest. It wasn't random, it was a grid, perfectly symmetric, measured, almost like a barcode or an exhaust vent, unlike anything you'd see from a natural phenomenon or an accident. Symbolically, it's chilling, because it suggests design. It wasn't chaos, it was engineering. Whether it was human or not, that was the real question. It's a weird burn pattern. Do we need to go back and look at the burn again? Does everybody need to see the burn? The burn on this middle-aged man's stomach? Get you an eyeful of this man's hairy chesticles. Let's look at some chesticles. Hold on. I'm going to pull up this man's chesticles. And then you're going to be like, dang, those are some chesticles right there. Check it out. Look at those burns. Look at this man's hamburger chest. That's a man. That's a 1967 man right there. I couldn't grow that much chest hair right now if I wanted to. But what a weird burn pattern. I'm going to say, though, it looks more like a bruise than a burn. And I know, so I've had a few burns in my time. That's what they say. There was a first degree burn. A superficial burn only affecting the epidermis, the outermost layer of the skin. Okay. Okay. I have had third-degree burns on my leg. I'm gonna tell you this story. It's a crazy story, wild story, but it does have relevance to this case. Okay, so, oh geez, I said the S word. I said the freaking S word. Oh my gosh. Many years ago, I did industrial maintenance. I worked for an entire facility. It was my job to keep the facility running. And I would do everything from electrical to plumbing to HVAC. I mean, everything. I did everything. It was me and like 12 other guys. We took care of this entire facility. It was like a square mile. It was a huge facility. And one winter, we discovered that one of their water lines busted. And nobody wanted to get down into the hole full of mud and water in the middle of winter. I was like, screw it. I was like, it's cool. It's fine. Let's dig this hole. I got down to the water line. We found the water leak. And what had happened was the water line busted because of the cold. But when we shut off the water, what happened was we were getting backfeed from one of the buildings nearby. And this is in an industrial setting. And the boiler was like, 10 foot tall, 8 foot, 8 foot across. It was huge. It was a gigantic boiler. I want to say it held 500 gallons of water, but it was part of the boiler system. So when we shut the water off that supplied the building, the boiler started backfeeding to where the water line busted. So we had water dumping out of the boiler into this hole where I was working. So I spent some time and I dug around and I got the entire water line break, isolated, and it was clear. And the only problem was, in order to get the pipe fixed, I needed the water out of the hole I was in. And I mean, this hole was over my head. It was a big hole. Let me. So this was a big hole. I'm talking like we were like 8 feet in the ground. So it was over my head. I'm 6 foot tall, so it's 2 foot over my head. And the only way that we could find a way so we could shut off the boiler to the building, but it wouldn't prevent the water from backfeeding into the hole I dug. So our only solution was to drop a sump pump down in the hole with a flexible hose running out of it, and it would pump the water out as it filled up. And that gave me enough time to, dig around the water line and clean it up so I can, cut the line, put a coupling on there and patch it. So I'm down in this hole and, I'm crouching down because, you don't, when you dig a hole, you don't dig any deeper than you really need to go. So I'm crouching down and I'm straddling this pump while I'm cleaning this pipe, right? So I'm down. Let me see. Is it smart to do this while I'm drinking? Maybe, maybe not. Let's see. So I'm crouched down. I'm crouched down over this pipe, right? Like this. You can't see my legs. I'm crouching right now. I'm crouching. Look at me crouching. I'm crouched down over the pipe. And I'm cleaning it. Doing my thing. So in between my legs is the pump that's pumping out the hot water from a boiler. 200 degrees. And I'm cleaning it, getting ready to cut the pipe and put the stuff on, do my thing. I'm down here. It's the middle of winter, mind you. Cleaning this pipe, doing my thing, and the pump starts making weird sounds, right? I'm like, whatever. I just got to get this done so I can get out of this hole. Cleaning this pipe, working on it. Next thing you know, the fitting that connected the pump to the hose, apparently the heat from the boiler loosened the glue, and the output for the pump just blew off. And I'm straddling it, right? So it blew like 212, 210 degree water like up my side, starting at my leg. So it was hottest at my leg. And we didn't know until, much later that it was 3rd-degree burns. I came out of that hole, and I was...
Viewers on streammoo.com, remove the space at BPV7JSB6.
Oh my gosh. I'm in the middle of a story, bots. Jeez, us. Let's report this guy for spam. Spam. Block this user. And we're going to ban them from the channel. Thank you, bot, for ruining my story. You're an asshole. Thank you. Wait, what is this? Just get a message from Twitch. Oh, we've actioned on your report already. Cool. Way to go, Twitch. Way to be quick about it. Sweet. Anyway, so this 200+ degree water blows up my side. Huge explosion. This thing pumps at like 70 gallons a minute. A massive pump. Massive. Think about it. 70 gallons a minute. It's, this is a 2.5-inch, 3-inch piece of PVC that just blew up my side. And I got 3rd-degree burns. I come out of this hole. I scramble out of this hole with this water shooting straight up. I scramble out of this hole, and the only thing I could do is take my clothes off because my clothes were covered in near boiling water. Standing there in my underwear, boxers, right? Middle of winter, and my skin starts falling off on my legs. It was bad. It was bad. And, I still got scars to this day. That was 12, 15 years ago. Still got scars to this day. It was rough. It was real rough. So that's what 3rd-degree burns are. So I had 3rd-degree burns on my body. Skin fell off. This guy had 1st-degree burns. So these are the type of burns that they just change the color of your skin. They make you pink. It happens. I'm not upset. It happens. But, I lost my train of thought why I was getting at that point. I find it hard to quantify a 1st-degree burn where obviously the heat source is pushing through some type of surface that would leave. So if we're directing heat through, let's say, a sheet of metal with holes in it, you're still going to get burned from the holes, but you're going to have marks from the metal, right? Because it's still the same temperature as the heat source. Potentially. But anywho, it's the heat source thing and the burn marks. A little weird. But, we'll get on to that. We'll get on. So let's move forward. Thank you. In 2017, on the 50th anniversary of the event, Stefan's son, Stan, gave a series of interviews. He brought with him original artifacts, his father's burned gloves, the melted tools, fragments of the shirt. He told the story with calm precision, just as his father had. And when he asked what he believed, Stan replied, quote, "I didn't believe him at first, but the evidence never stopped lining up." End quote. Stan has gone on to record stating that the Canadian government still hasn't offered an apology, compensation, or even public acknowledgement of his father's trauma. And he doesn't expect them to. But he also says, quote, "I believe my dad because he never asked to be believed. He just wanted the truth recorded." End quote. And maybe it's the legacy of Falcon Lake, not just a UFO story, but just a reminder of what happened when ordinary people encounter extraordinary things, and the world refuses to listen. The land around Falcon Lake has changed. Tourists come and go. Hikers pass through the pines without a clue of what happened there. But if you know where to look, you can still find it. That flat rock, the quiet clearing, the place where one man met the impossible. There's no plaque, no sign, no warning, just silence and a burn mark. The one that refused to fade. So we've come on to Act 5. We're bringing it all back together. Everything's coming together. Let's move on to Act 5. Falcon Lake wasn't the only event of its kind. Just 10 years earlier, in 1967, another incident occurred in Shag Harbor, Nova Scotia, this is a case I want to cover, where multiple witnesses, including police, saw an object crash into the ocean. That case, too, remains unsolved in the U.S. around the same era. The Lonnie Zamora incident in 1964 in New Mexico, a police officer witnessed a landed craft with two small figures and scorch marks left behind. The Cash Landrum case in 1980 in Texas, two women and a child encountered a fiery diamond-shaped object that allegedly caused radiation burns and long-term illness. And the Rendlesham Forest incident, which we covered here on this podcast. In 1980, in the UK, the U.S. military personnel at a NATO base encountered a craft and reported bizarre light phenomena and physical effects on the environment. These cases all involve similar threads: government investigations, psychological harm, physiological harm, witnesses with credibility, physical traces, and long-term silence. They're part of a global pattern stretching across continents and decades. Falcon Lake doesn't sit outside the UFO narrative, it anchors it. It's one of the earliest, cleanest examples of human being getting too close to something he was never supposed to touch. And the scars told the story. So if Stefan spent his final decades trying to forget what happened, his son Stan has spent his adulthood doing the opposite. Stan was just a boy when it happened, too young to understand the fear in his father's voice when returning from Falcon Lake. Too young to grasp why men in suits kept visiting the house, why neighbors whispered, why reporters circled. But as he grew older, Stan realized his father had carried the truth that no one wanted to hear. So he began researching, documenting, and preserving. He collected everything: medical records, soil tests, radiation reports, government memos, photos of the wounds, lab analysis, and declassified Blue Book files. And in 2017, on the 50th anniversary of the incident, he co-authored a book, quote, When They Appeared, a book chronicling the entire event with stunning detail and clarity. Through Stan's work, Falcon Lake hasn't just survived, it's been resurrected. Brought out of the shadows, no pun intended, Beyond the Shadows podcast. Brought out of the shadows, returned to the center of global conversation about what we know and what we choose to forget. He said in an interview, quote, I don't care if people believe it or not, the evidence is there. My father lived it, and that's enough, end quote. So we've come to the conclusion. Whether we think this is truly paranormal or not. And this is one of the few cases that I cannot truly make up my mind about. So when it comes to a legit paranormal investigation case, we want to ask ourselves, who's making money off of this? The individual that had the initial encounter did not make a dime off of this. He did not. In fact, he went into financial squalor because of what happened. So, we see his son, he wrote a book. A little sus, a little bit, just a tiny bit, not a lot. But we don't see movies being made. We don't see documentaries being made. So we've had cases in the past. Go back and look. We've got a playlist here on YouTube of evidence-based cases that have to do with aliens and UFOs that have less evidence with a greater social impact. That they are making movies, writing books, doing interviews, talking at conferences, what have you. They're still doing it. This guy never did it. Up until 99 when he died. But on the flip side of that, let's go back to the shirt. This is the only thing that bothers me. This is the shirt. So this is the shirt that was cut off of him at the hospital. Sure, it shows the pattern of the burns. Sure. However, what you're seeing here in the front, so like right here in the middle, above the square pattern with the dots, that's the front of the shirt. But if you look, there's more burns off to the sides. So this indicates he got burned in the chest. Yeah, I mean, I have a few of these shirts. He was burned here. Right here. The burn pattern is here. Right where the pattern is on my shirt. But the marks were on his stomach. Then, look at this photo. If you look on the left side, you see more burns. Right side, underneath where my camera is, more burns. This shirt was cut off of him. So that shows there was a burn here, and then a burn on his back. His back? How did he get burned in his chest? Burned on his back, but only left with first-degree burns on his stomach. Right? Not far-fetched. Not at all. So I think there's something fishy about this case. I don't know what it is, but there's so much evidence that I have a hard time saying it's fake. Unless this guy has got 2 different classes of radioactive materials hanging around and a custom-made stainless steel piece of metal that he could blow a propane torch through that could burn the front of his shirt and the back without hurting him, with only first-degree burns. I don't know how he did it. I don't. So I have a hard time coming down on a conclusion. I really do. It's a lot of firsthand accounts. However, I need to see a little bit more physical. So I guess, in a nutshell, I'm going to say that this case, when we talk about the Falcon Lake Incident, is probably not truly paranormal. I'm sorry. And it may ruffle some feathers, but it's just what I think. I'm sorry. The evidence just doesn't line up well enough. Let me run to the bathroom one more time, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. Hold, please. Hold, please. All right, I'm back. Hello, friends. Sorry about that. Lots of beers, lots of bathroom breaks. And hoots. So, I said the S word. Let me drink again. We've looked at all the evidence here. I think I can say with pretty damn well near certainty, I have a hard time understanding what's going to burn the front of somebody's shirt and the back, but only leave first-degree burns on the person. So I'm going to say that this case, the case of the Falcon Lake Incident, is not truly paranormal. And I'm sorry if I let some folks down, but I just have a hard time believing it. I do. It's just looking at the evidence, which is what we do. We've only got one person's testimony. I don't know how he did it, but he did it. If maybe like 2 or 3 other people had spotted UFOs in the sky that night, maybe I would lean a little more towards, yeah, it's paranormal, but it's just not enough paranormal for me to come down on a conclusion that this is really paranormal. And I'm sorry, but I just can't put that stamp of approval on it without just a little bit more evidence. And the Canadian government minted a coin for this guy. But we don't have like a single marker on Google Maps saying, hey, this is where it happened. Is it so far-fetched? Is it? So, with that being said, we're going to wrap it up, folks. We're done for the night. Next week, we're going to try to do a cryptid. We've been kind of lacking on the cryptids lately. We're going to shoot for something a little different. I want to be as engaging as possible. It's hard to say what we're going to do right now. We've got a couple suggestions for some haunted locations. We'll touch on those probably the following week. But next week, I think we should do a cryptid. We need to do probably a couple cryptids in a row to even out the scales, to make everything nice and balanced. So, what did you think? Drop a comment down below. Tell me what you think about it. If you're that person that watched the episode to the 3/5 mark, hey, thanks for sticking through, buddy. I appreciate it. I put a lot of work into this to have nobody really watching. One person, we have 0 people watching right now. If you have your own paranormal tale, case, or claim, feel free to email us. The information is down below. BeyondShadowsPodcast@gmail.com. Feel free to email us anytime. It doesn't matter if you've got a 3-sentence case. We will read it. We'll talk all about it. You could also catch us at Beyond Shadows Podcast on YouTube. We are on every major social media platform. Feel free to reach out. Give us a like, give us a follow. I appreciate every single person that follows. We had 2 new subscribers to the YouTube channel this week. Thank you so much to you guys. I don't know who you are, otherwise I'd give you guys a shout out on the channel. I'm sorry. Your privacy settings are so high I cannot see who you are. But thank you for your follow. We had 2 or 3 this week. I'm very grateful. Very grateful. I work very hard at this podcast, and I do it by myself. So every single person that I can get to come along that enjoys what we do here, thank you so much. I work very, very hard for this, and I'm glad that somebody finds some value in what I do here. So we're going to get on out of here. I'm going to tee us up. I think we're going to raid somebody tonight. I think my homie is streaming right now. Yeah, we're going to raid him with the 1 viewer. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're going to raid my buddy Heffy's here. He's doing his thing here. Check him out. He's my buddy. Let me do another shout out for Heff here.
Go check out Hefner at twitch.tv/Hefner and go show them some love. Less than 3, less than 3, less than 3.
Less than 3. Less than 3. This is my buddy. We go way, way, way back. We've known each other since we were in middle school. Is my guy. He's the guy that got me onto streaming. He's the guy that got me doing what I do today. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't do anything that I do today. And very rarely does he show up in the stream, but when he does, it is truly a momentous occasion. But I'm going to read us out with our closing monologue, and I will catch y'all next week. I hope everybody does okay. Or I hope everybody's doing okay. And that being said, let's get into this closing monologue.
There are stories that refuse to fade. Incidents buried under silence that continues to breathe just beneath the surface. And in those spaces, between explanation and evidence, something waits. A shadow, a question, a burn that never fully heals. And so we leave the scorched granite behind and quiet pines of Falcon Lakes sway once more in the wind. But they remember what happened to Stefan. What happened to Stefan may never be resolved, but it was never forgotten. So, if you find yourself like granite cliffside with UFO landing in front of you, don't approach. But be careful. Because you never know if you're going to be blasted with vent exhaust from a UFO and criticized and ridiculed for the remainder of your life. But whatever you do, make sure you follow us. Beyond the shadows. Good night, everyone.
Creature like that, how would it ever die?
And this monster's just running right at me.
Annihilated by nuclear bombs.
Beast is not dead. I put 4 bullets into him.
Oh, you're crazy.
But I saw that monster too. All I want is for someone to believe me.
Contaminated.
Face. Horrible. Look like it would scare you to death.
All right, let's get to work.
Beyond the shadows.